What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the German Bear Podcast. And today we want to talk about my personal top 3 candidates of head coaches that the Chicago Bears could potentially bring in to be the leader of the team for 2025. After firing Matt Eberflus and getting Thomas Brown as the interim head coach for the Chicago Bears, it was pretty quickly clear that they are not going to stick with Thomas Brown as a head coach, or at least not give other guys a try and interview a bunch of people for this position. And the Chicago Bears took requesting everyone to a whole nother level, because as of right now, they've already requested 14 overall interviews with potential suitors for this position, and this is going to be one of, again, a franchise-altering decision for the Chicago Bears, and especially GM Ryan Poles, because Ryan Poles, by a lot of fans, is on the hot seat, and he really needs to nail this badly, and not just him, but also the McCaskies and Kevin Warren and the entire organization. It's crucial to hit this head coaching search. Why? Because the Chicago Bears finally got a quarterback as talented as Caleb Williams is, and after a pretty good rookie season, which is unusual for a Bears rookie, we really think we have a franchise quarterback here, and I definitely think so too, and that's why they really need to hit this. Now, overall, 14 requests so far. Let me tell you guys beforehand, there are a couple of guys on this list that I do not like. All right, the Bears already requested a couple of interviews where I already thought, oh shit, what are we doing again? But there's hope, and we'll see it today. My top 3 with a couple of honorable mentions. There's good coaches in this coaching search so far for the Bears on the list, but also a couple that I do not like, and I'll talk about it right now why. So there's a couple of things I personally considered during my list of candidates that I put together, and what I will think will determine the decision for Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears moving forward, as he already slightly mentioned in his press conference. Now, the first big point is Caleb Williams. Number one thing is developing a pro out of Caleb Williams, make him a good NFL quarterback, not just a great college quarterback that had a solid rookie season. No, we want him to be a good to great quarterback for a long time in this league. So we need a guy that can develop this quarterback. Number 2, scheme. The Chicago Bears have a pretty good roster. That's why I think it's a pretty attractive spot for a lot of guys out there to become the head coach for Chicago, because there's pieces there. But there needs to be a scheme that fits those players and a guy that knows how to utilize those guys and doesn't force a scheme onto these guys, right? So there's a couple of players last year that have not been utilized the right way, and the production dipped heavily. Cole Kmet could have had a way better year than he actually had. DJ Moore, same thing. Roma Dunze, same thing. So I think with the right scheme and the coach that knows how to use those players, I think we'll be in a good spot. And then the third thing is my point 1.3, the offensive line. Right? The offensive line is not great for the Chicago Bears. I think we need more depth. There's a couple of positions that we need to replace with better players, especially that left tackle position. I do not trust Braxton Jones at all. So that's my first big key point, what a coach needs to bring. That's the most important thing. Number 2, culture. We need a leader of men. We need a guy that players buy into and actually want to play for. Right? With that, hand in hand goes the philosophy and the plan of that head coach. What is his plans for the future with this roster? How does he want to handle this? How does he want to approach offseason, preseason, regular season, playoffs? How can he keep these guys up to 110% every single week and overperform? We need a guy that can bring a culture. And with that, also an aspect is going to be Chicago. Right? Chicago is a big market for sports teams, and the Bears are a very popular team, obviously, not just there, but look at me, German guy, around the whole world. And in order to succeed in Chicago as a coach, you got to have a certain attitude that fits the people. So I think that's got to be a small little point as well to mention here. Big third key point. Coaching decisions. We need a guy that has the ability to manage the game the right way. That's why I am so glad that the Dallas Cowboys denied the request for the interview of Mike McCarthy, because that guy doesn't know what to do with the clock and how to use his timeouts. And same goes with the clock management for Matt Eberflus. It was horrible. So we need a guy that makes the right decisions on the sideline. Second thing, assistant coaches, right? There's going to be decisions to be made. It doesn't matter if that guy is going to be just a head coach or a head coach and a play caller. There's still other phases of the game that he has to hit the coordinator spots with. If we get an offensive-minded coach and the offense is going to perform great, well, look at the Cincinnati Bengals. Defense completely collapsed. They had a great offense, but the season was still done because they couldn't hold anything on defense. So he still needs to hire good assistant coaches. And then the last thing is the buy-in and the media. I think that players, first of all, again, coaching decisions need to buy in. I think there's certain things a coach can do in order to hold up those standards. And also the Chicago media is going to be a rough territory as well, because not only fans, but also media is getting impatient with the Chicago Bears. And that coach, if he doesn't deliver quickly, is going to feel that burning pressure of Bears media and fans immediately again. So it's going to be a pressurized spot where you have to perform under. And then the last thing, just a very minor thing, but it applies for one coach specifically, age. I do not want Pete Carroll as the Chicago Bears head coach, and that's in no disrespectful way at all. We need to think long term. We don't need coaches that are over 70, right? Get new guys the chance to perform. I don't think he's a bad coach. And if Pete Carroll's going to be the guy, I'm not going to be super mad about it, but I'm definitely not going to be happy because it's not long term thinking. And I don't know if he's the right guy for the Chicago Bears situation. Still love my guy Pete Carroll, though. Great coach. He's a role model for a lot of coaches out there, so shout out to him, but age should definitely matter as well. And with that being said, let's actually get into a couple of guys and start off with the honorable mentions before we want to go into the top three. Just quickly want to mention a couple of guys that I would be absolutely fine with if we hire these guys, or I would absolutely like those guys as well, because I was thinking making this a top 5 video, but then I was like, it's going to take too long to prepare. I don't have that much time again. So those are my honorable mentions, and my technically number 5 guy on the list would be Todd Monken, offensive coordinator for the Ravens. Great coach, has an incredible offense down there in Baltimore, is a well-experienced guy, also with championships at Georgia, right? He was the offensive coordinator before that at the University of Georgia, and also had a couple of good years with the Buccaneers as an offensive coordinator as well. So Todd Monken, definitely not a bad option. Only issue with him is I think he has too many great weapons right now so that we could fairly judge how good he's actually going to be. And at the same time, I just have a couple of guys that I like a little bit more, but Todd Monken would be a great hire, and I wouldn't mind it at all. Number 4 for me is Aaron Glenn. On the technically top 5 list that we're not having right now as an honorable mention is Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. Now I wanted to bring him in. He's maybe not my favorite coaching hire if he actually ends up as the Bears head coach. I would probably even prefer Todd Monken, but from what I mentioned earlier, the culture aspect that I'm looking for in a coach, I think Aaron Glenn is the closest thing you can get to actually getting Dan Campbell onto your roster as the coach, because he just lives and breathes the tough Detroit mentality that I absolutely admire and think is something beautiful in the football way, and I want that with the Chicago Bears as well. So from that standpoint, I think he's a pretty good and attractive candidate, and then also his defense is going to play tough. I mean, he's had to overcome so much adversity with the Lions, so many issues, so many hurt players, and he still managed to only allow 9 points to the 14-2 Vikings, and throughout the season did some incredible stuff with that Detroit Lions defense. So I think he's a good candidate, not my favorite though. And then 2 more honorable mentions I want to name, Liam Cohen and Cliff Kingsbury. Cliff Kingsbury, not my favorite guy because of his previous head coaching record. He seemed overwhelmed. I don't know if it's going to be better his second time around, but we've seen it with a couple of guys that got even a second shot. It doesn't always turn out, and some guys are just better coordinators. I think Cliff is that kind of a guy. I like him. He's not bad. He knows Caleb, of course, with his time at USC. I just don't think he's the best option, but I wouldn't be mad at all if the Bears get him. And then Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator for the Bucs, I think it's just a little bit of an experience thing. But, I mean, he's also a very good offensive coordinator that made great things and continued Dave Canal's success with the Buccaneers. and Liam Cohen actually managed to uphold that high standard with Baker Mayfield this year, so he would also not be a bad option. He's just not in my top 3. And with that being said, let's finally get to the top 3 of coaching candidates for the Chicago Bears. And I want to start off with my third option, working down to the number 1, which is going to be an offensive-minded guy that I think a lot of people actually like, and that is Joe Brady from the Buffalo Bills. Now, Joe Brady was being held as the quarterback whisperer and a big star at the sky of the coaches in 2019 when he was the pass game coordinator for LSU. And after that coaching experience, he absolutely shot into the NFL sphere, earning an offensive coordinator job with the Carolina Panthers. Now, that did not go too well, right? It was not a great time with the Carolina Panthers, and he struggled with everything there as the offensive coordinator. It was not horrible, but it was also not great. And after that time, he decided to move on to the Buffalo Bills as the quarterback's coach, then as the interim offensive coordinator after they fired their OC mid-season last year. And now he was the full-time offensive coordinator this year for the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. So he is once again on the rise in the coaching sphere, and I think he's a very intriguing candidate. So that much for his backstory. Now, why do I like Joe Brady? First and foremost, yes, he has a great quarterback, but still it's not always easy to do great with a good quarterback. And he has led the Bills to a top 10 offense in almost every category this season, which is super impressive. Second big thing, he knows how to develop a quarterback. As I said, my number 1 thing is Caleb Williams. He knows how to get a quarterback into a good situation and eliminate mistakes. Right? So he knows his priorities in the run game, which is then later on going to open up the passing game, which we definitely missed with the Chicago Bears. And as I've looked through the pass to run percentage in the NFL, most of the top offenses have more runs or almost as equal runs as passes in the league, and the pass percentage only for the Kansas City Chiefs is pretty high for a top offense, but they can do this because Patrick Mahomes and an offense is just so creative. They're going to make big plays no matter how they move the football. But most of the great teams right now in the league have a pretty low passing percentage because they set up the pass with a good run game. Same goes for Joe Brady and the Buffalo Bills. Also, I think he evolved Josh Allen from a great quarterback to the best quarterback in the NFL. I think he eliminated a lot of mistakes from last year that he made and made him a better, more efficient, and less turnover-worthy quarterback. So that's a big thing that I like about him. And also, he coached under Sean McDermott and Sean Payton. So he might have learned a thing or two from these guys. Great leader of men, going to my second point, being culture setters in a system. Those two guys set cultures in New Orleans and Buffalo, so he must have learned something under these guys. Now, things that he lacks a little bit, definitely experience. He's only 35 years old, has 7 total years of coaching experience in the NFL. He has a little more in college, but overall, he has not that much experience coaching, and I think he calls from the booth, which I think showed with Thomas Brown can be overwhelming. That switch from being in the booth, having your calm, calling plays, seeing the entire field, to getting to the sideline, not seeing the entire field anymore, and having much more priorities, that can quickly overwhelm a coach. And as I said, we saw that with Thomas Brown. That's why I think the performance in the end went down a lot, because I think Thomas Brown is not a bad coordinator, but I think he's not ready to be a head coach yet. So that scares me a little bit with Joe Brady, but I think it's a high-risk, high-reward type of deal where you could get a really great offensive guy that can develop Caleb Williams into the right system with potentially great culture presets from his previous coaches that he's worked with. And I think that provides a very attractive candidate that could be here for the long term. And we've seen this previously, just like with the Packers. Matt LaFleur was not that high of a decorated coach before he got the head coaching job with the Green Bay Packers, and he just definitely turned out as an all-right coach, right? So I think with Joe Brady, there's a lot of potential there, a lot of long-term potential. It's just a question, will he turn out that way? So that's why he is my number 3 guy on the list. Moving on to my number 2 guy, which is going to be pretty obviously Mike Vrabel. I think it's absolutely surprising that he got fired after 2 pretty rough seasons, I have to admit that, with the Tennessee Titans, his last 2 seasons there. But still, the firing of Mike Vrabel did not sit well with me, and I'm not even a Titans fan because I always admired his coaching style and the way he just led the Tennessee Titans to multiple playoff experiences, and I thought he was a pretty cool coach. Now, overall, he is a guy with head coaching experience that sets him apart a little bit from the other 2 candidates on the list today. He has a 54-45 winning record and had 4 of 6 seasons as a winning season in his books. Now, the big question is for him that I want to mention before we go into the pros and cons, the coordinators. And I'll answer that in my conclusion today because that's something a lot of people mentioned along the way so far with Mike Vrabel not having the best coordinators. Now, the big pluses with Mike Vrabel are, first of all, going back to the beginning, culture. The locker room with Mike Vrabel will be under control. I think there's no doubt about it. This guy is going to get the mindset of the players right 100%. He is a leader of men, might even be the definition of a leader of men, and will be a close competitor to Dan Campbell, even though Dan Campbell, of course, gets more screen time. But I think from the impact of a coach, Mike Vrabel just has as much of an impact on a team. He will make players overperform and play at 110% every single week, no matter the record. He definitely knows how to run the ball. I mean, obviously, he had a great running back, but he doesn't shy away from running the football and then setting up a good passing game off of that, and the defense is going to play hard nonetheless. So running the ball and playing hard defense is something we're known to in Chicago. It's just a question, can we have the quarterback play additionally to that too in order to be Super Bowl contenders? And then one last big plus for me personally, which I don't think a lot of people bring up, is that he revived and developed Ryan Tannehill into a better quarterback than he was before in his previous stint with the Miami Dolphins. He made him into a comeback player of the year. He made him into a Pro Bowl quarterback. So to me personally, that's something that should not go unnoticed in this coaching search and should definitely be considered. Now, going back to the question earlier with Mike Vrabel, how is he going to do with the coordinator search? And I think there's 2 guys that he had during his tenure with the Tennessee Titans that give me a lot of hope. First of all, Matt LaFleur. Already mentioned him as the new Packers head coach. He got hired to the Packers job after he had the offensive coordinator spot in 2018 for the 9-7 Tennessee Titans, the year Ryan Tannehill won the Comeback Player of the Year award. So obviously Matt LaFleur turned out into a head coach. Now, another offensive coordinator that he had on his roster after Matt LaFleur, 2019 and 2020, was Arthur Smith. And I know a lot of people are not too big of a fan of Arthur Smith, but at the end of the day, again, he got a head coaching position and now is back in an offensive coordinator position. So to me, those are 2 great hires that help the Tennessee Titans to succeed and give me hope that at least on the offensive side of the ball, he's going to make not too bad of a decision of getting an offensive coordinator. And about the defense with Mike Vrabel, I'm not having any issues at all going into this situation if he's going to be the guy. So overall, yes, with him being the head coach and not the play caller, there's the potential of guys leaving, but he showed after Matt LaFleur bringing in Arthur Smith, developing him before on his coaching staff, he can continuously get good coordinators on his team. So that's great, a great indicator that he couldn't succeed, even though that issue could potentially come up. And then another big thing to consider with him is the quarterback situation. When he was with the Titans, he had Ryan Tannehill, helped him to play at a very high level, but obviously at some point, Ryan Tannehill was not the same guy anymore. He had a couple of issues with injuries and was just not overall the best quarterback. So at some point, it was clear that the fall off was going to come, and after that, he didn't really have another good quarterback. With the Chicago Bears situation, it's different. We have Caleb Williams, and Mike Vrabel has never had a talented quarterback as Caleb Williams ever on his roster. So he doesn't need to find a quarterback. He just needs to make sure there's a guy that can develop him or a coaching staff that can develop him and moving forward can be successful. So Mike Vrabel, concluding with him, that's my number 2 guy. And then moving on to the number 1 guy, and I think that's the guy everybody has on his list, but I still want to talk about him because I think he's just a great guy. Let's talk about Ben Johnson. And I mean, Ben Johnson is the guy on the market right now that everybody wants on his team. Also, I gotta say, Mike Vrabel is probably going to the Patriots, so that's a guy that we can already slightly turn off of the list. I could have left him off, but I didn't really want to. But Ben Johnson still, for the most part, besides maybe Patriots fans, is the number one guy on the market that everybody's looking after. He's the rising star on the coaches market for years now, and it's time to find out if it's all true what we're hearing about Ben Johnson, if he's going to be that great guy, and hopefully he will experience that truth with the Chicago Bears. I'm all up for it. Now, why is Ben Johnson so attractive for this position? First of all, he's an offensive genius. That's a priority number one I mentioned earlier. We want Caleb Williams to develop. He will attack that wish/priority with 110, with 1,000% every single week. He will make sure that Caleb Williams is going to be a good quarterback in this league. Second of all, talking about his scheme a little bit more, he is as creative as it gets. I think I've never seen a coach actually do trick plays every single week. He just simply doesn't care, because he says every single week you can do a trick play, and then we do another one the next week that you haven't seen before, so it doesn't really matter. We don't have to hold back on trick plays. I love that aggressive mentality. He knows definitely how to utilize his players. And then lastly, the physicality of his football team. Now, obviously, that depends a little bit on the players that you have, but I think in the end of the day, it's still about leadership, setting a culture, and getting a right scheme together in order to be physical, and they definitely got that job done with the Detroit Lions. Also, another great fact, he developed Jared Goff and hooked him to the next level. He's obviously already been a good quarterback with Sean McVay, but now we can all agree that Jared Goff has taken a huge step forward and is now even considered a MVP caliber quarterback. That is because of Ben Johnson utilizing his guy and putting him in the right spot. That's music in my ears thinking about Caleb Williams. And he eliminated the errors in his game, which is turnovers. Yes, he had a pretty turnover-heavy game once this year, and that was a couple of unlucky picks as well. But overall, he doesn't turn the ball over. That's great. And then also, all 3 seasons, talking about the entire offense in a little bit of a statistical way, he's had the Detroit Lions in the top 5 in points scored, in the top 3 in rushing yards, in the top 10 in passing yards, and the past 2 years being actually number 2 and number 2. So I only wrote top 10 because 3 years or 3 seasons ago, he was the number 8 ranked offense in the NFL, or he led the number 8 ranked offense. And lastly, he's not afraid of any situation and showed his cool and pressurized situations. Just like last week against Brian Flores, defensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings, high stakes game. He didn't fold and led the offense to over 30 points, I think, and showed why he is that guy and doesn't fold in those situations. Now, with every single candidate, there's a couple of, I would say, cons and concerns that I want to share. Just like with Joe Brady a little bit, experience. He has more coaching experience in the NFL, but he's still going to be a first-time head coach, right? He's never done this before. So there's going to be a lot of adjustments for him personally, how to create this situation. Also, he's not on the same roster. The Detroit Lions have one of the best rosters, especially on the offensive side of the ball in the NFL. And they have one position group that absolutely dominates and sticks out in comparison to the Chicago Bears, the offensive line. He's not going to have Penei Sewell in Chicago, or at least not yet. I mean, hopefully we can draft a couple of guys and succeed in the future, but the situation is going to be a little bit different. He's not going to have that much time, that athletic of an offensive line. He's not going to be able to get a tackle to football and make him throw the ball. Right? So it's going to be different than the Detroit Lions situation. But as I said earlier, Chicago is a pretty attractive destination still to coaches. And I think we can still give coaches a good reason to get here besides the offensive line issues that can be fixed if the right decisions are being made. And then the big question is going to be, is he a leader of a whole organization plus that genius at the same time on offense? And I think a couple of things I can say that will probably back that up. First of all, under Dan Campbell, I think it doesn't get more tough of a coach than that. And he set an insane, great play at a maximum level effort culture at Detroit. Ben Johnson has been under him for 3 years. There had to be things that struck out to him. There had to be things that he learned from Dan Campbell to move on from and learn for himself to take to his next destination, which is hopefully going to be the Bears head coaching job. So I think he is a good culture leader. I think all his players that I've heard about, they really love him and like playing under him. So putting all these pros and cons together, also keeping my criteria that I mentioned earlier in mind, to me, he is easily the number one guy on the list. And it's not going to be Ben Johnson or bust. I think there's other good options. As I mentioned, I like Joe Brady. I like Mike Vrabel, even though I think he's going to be a Patriot. I think there's no way or no doubt that he's going to be the head coach for the Patriots moving forward. And I think also the honorable mentions guys that I had today are going to be solid head coaching options. But at the end of the day, I think Ben Johnson can get the most out of the Chicago Bears situation right now. And that's why he is my number one option and that guy I want to see under the headset for the Chicago Bears in 2025 and moving forward the most. And with that being said, guys, that's the end of today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. It's turning out to be a pretty long episode, but I really enjoyed talking about these coaching situations and these coaching options that the Bears have right now and already requested interviews with. Definitely let me know in the comments down below what you think of these options and who is your number one guy going into this head coaching search. Like and subscribe if you liked the video. Check out Instagram and Twitter if you want to as well. And as always, guys, bear down.